Imagine you're packing for a relaxing weekend trip to the beach, right? You've got your swimsuit, maybe a good book, some sunglasses.
Sounds perfect.
Right. But then every magazine you open, every single financial guru on your feed, every, well-meaning relative, they all keep insisting that you absolutely must bring a Himalayan expedition tent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and like 3 weeks of freeze-dried rations, plus a satellite-linked avalanche beacon.
The beach.
Exactly, for the beach. And you would look down at your little, canvas duffel bag and immediately feel this deep, sinking sense of panic.
You'd probably just cancel the trip.
I know I would. You'd decide to just stay home because the barrier to entry suddenly feels impossibly high.
Yeah, it creates this profound sense of paralysis.
Yeah.
I mean, when the stated requirements for a goal are just so vastly disproportionate to the reality of the undertaking,
Yeah.
human nature is to just freeze.
Right.
We assume we've already failed before we've even started the engine.
And that feeling of sheer paralysis is honestly the perfect metaphor for what is happening right now with how you, me, and pretty much the entire country are thinking about retirement.
It really is.
Because there is this staggering, totally anxiety-inducing gap between the popular mythology of what we supposedly need to retire and the actual, on-the-ground statistical reality. So welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
We are spending today's conversation bridging that exact gap. We're pulling from a mountain of recent financial data today. We've got the latest 2026 Northwestern Mutual Planning and Progress Study, data from the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances.
Which was analyzed by the Congressional Research Service, yeah.
Right, along with some really great insights from AARP and CBS News. And look, the goal today isn't to induce a panic attack about the future.
No, please, no more panic.
But exactly. It's to cut through the jargon, examine what the numbers actually say, and, figure out a realistic path forward, maybe give you some peace of mind. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's do it. It's so vital we look at these numbers collectively because individually, they can absolutely be weaponized to generate clicks and fear.
Oh, 100%.
But when you synthesize the data from the Congressional Research Service alongside those private studies, you get a much clearer and, frankly, a much less terrifying picture of the American financial landscape.
Well, let's start with the terror, though.
Okay, fair enough.
Because we have to address the elephant in the room. According to that 2026 Northwestern Mutual data, Americans have established a new, quote-unquote, magic number that they believe they must stockpile to retire comfortably.
And it is a big number.
It's massive. That expectation is now sitting at $1.46 million.
Yeah. And if you isolate the data for high net worth individuals, that anticipated requirement surges to $2.67 million.
It's just an astronomical figure. Like, we have deeply internalized this cultural narrative that if you don't cross a seven-figure finish line, your golden years are basically going to be defined by scarcity.
But when we pivot to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances, that illusion shatters pretty quickly, doesn't it?
Oh, it shatters instantly.
Yeah.
The Federal Reserve data provides this necessary cold splash of water because based on their most recent comprehensive surveys, only 2.5% of all Americans actually have $1 million or more sitting in their retirement accounts.
Wait, 2.5%?
Just 2.5%. And even if we filter that to look strictly at people who are currently retired, like the people who have theoretically finished the race,
Right.
only 3.2% of them have hit that $1 million mark.
Okay, wait, I really need to make sure we're absorbing that. Only 3.2% of actual current retirees are sitting on $1 million.
That's the data.
So that means 96.8% of the people successfully living in retirement right now are doing it with less.
Much less.
Yeah, I'm assuming much less if we look at the medians.
Considerably less, yeah. The Congressional Research Service analysis points out that only 54.3% of U.S. households even have a designated retirement account, like a 401k or an IRA.
Wow, barely over half?
Exactly. And for the households that actually participate in these accounts, the median balance is just $87,000.
It's $87,000.
Yeah. And if you look at the folks right in the critical retirement zone, so ages 65 to 74, the median there is only around $200,000.
Okay, so if the median for people right on the threshold of retiring is only $200,000, why are we collectively obsessing over $1.46 million as the universal baseline?
It's a great question.
I mean, it feels like we are mistaking a statistical anomaly for a mandatory standard.
We absolutely are. And it happens because of a fundamental flaw in how financial data is communicated to the public. You often hear reports citing the average retirement account balance, which currently sits around $334,097.
Right, which sounds a lot higher than 87,000.
Exactly. But averages in economics are notoriously deceptive. They're aggressively skewed by ultra-wealthy outliers. Like a handful of billionaires can pull the average up drastically, and that creates a totally false impression of the typical experience.
Oh, that makes total sense, because the median literally just cuts the population exactly in half.
Right, the median tells the genuine story of the everyday earner. But, we remain fixated on the million-dollar myth because media outlets love highlighting those skewed, inflated averages.
Because it gets clicks.
Exactly. And those inflated numbers validate our very real underlying fears about things like inflation and longevity.
That dynamic is so fascinating. We see a headline highlighting an inflated average. We feel the sting of, grocery prices doubling at the store. And our brains immediately accept that $1 million is the bare minimum for survival.
It's a perfect storm of anxiety.
But since only about 2% of the population is actually pulling off this seven-figure feat, I'm really curious about the anatomy of that 2%. Like, who are these statistical outliers?
Well, Fidelity Investments recently released some data on this, which AARP and CBS News covered extensively, and it gives us a really good profile of this exclusive club.
Let's hear it.
So the number of 401k millionaires at Fidelity did hit a record high at the end of 2024. It reached about 537,000 accounts.
Oh.
That was actually a 27% year-over-year increase.
Sure, but even with a 27% spike, Fidelity has tens of millions of participants.
Right.
Those 537,000 accounts still only represent about 2% of their total customer base. And, we should probably point out that this massive jump wasn't necessarily because people suddenly started hoarding cash.
No, not at all.
It was primarily fueled by the S&P 500 gaining, 23% that year?
Exactly. The market did the heavy lifting there.
So if we look closely at this 2% club, beyond just market gains, what are the common denominators?
Well, when you map the Fidelity outcomes against the demographic data from the Congressional Research Service, the systemic advantages become impossible to ignore.
I can imagine.
Income, unsurprisingly, is the primary driver.
Yep.
Over 91% of households earning $150,000 or more have retirement accounts. Contrast that with households making under $30,000, where only 13.2% even have access to or utilize an account.
That is a massive divide.
It is. And education creates another massive chasm. The median retirement savings for a college graduate is $141,700.
Okay.
But for someone whose formal education ended with a high school diploma, that median drops to just $44,000.
Wow. The homeownership statistic was the one that really caught my eye in the sources, though.
Oh, it's huge.
It showed homeowners have an average of about $303,000 in their retirement accounts, which is over 2.5 times the average of someone who rents. But help me connect the dots there.
Sure.
How does paying a mortgage directly correlate to having triple the stock market investments of a renter?
It comes down to forced equity and inflation hedging.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, a fixed-rate mortgage stabilizes your largest monthly expense. While renters are subjected to, escalating housing costs year after year, homeowners effectively lock in their payments.
So their housing costs stay flat while their income hopefully grows.
Exactly. Which eventually frees up more disposable income over time to direct toward equities. Furthermore, just the ability to secure a mortgage in the first place implies a level of creditworthiness, income stability, and financial literacy that naturally translates into higher retirement participation.
That makes a lot of sense. Wealth doesn't exist in a vacuum. It compounds across multiple asset classes.
Right.
Which brings us to the most critical component of compounding. The data shows that the single most unifying characteristic of a Fidelity 401k millionaire isn't just a high salary.
No.
It's time. It's tenure.
Absolutely. The average tenure for these millionaire accounts is 27 years.
27 years.
Yeah. What's fascinating here is that this wealth wasn't built overnight on some hot stock. That represents nearly 3 decades of continuous, unbroken participation in the market.
So they aren't day trading meme stocks on their lunch breaks.
Definitely not.
They're largely older Gen Xers and baby boomers who just quietly funneled a portion of every paycheck into a boring target date fund for the entirety of their adult lives.
It is the most boring, unglamorous path to wealth imaginable.
Boring, but historically undefeated.
Very true.
But here is where the friction really starts for the listener today, I think. Because if you look at those requirements, you need a high income, you need to own a home to stabilize your costs, and you need 30 uninterrupted years of market growth.
It's a tall order now.
It completely explains the absolute panic we're seeing in younger generations right now.
Oh, the anxiety is practically vibrating off the pages of the Northwestern Mutual study. They found that 48% of Americans believe it is highly likely they will outlive their savings.
Nearly half the population.
Half the population anticipates running out of money before they die.
And the horizon for mortality just keeps stretching. The same study revealed that 27% of Americans fully expect to live to be 100 years old.
Which is incredible, but expensive.
Right. If you combine the prospect of a century-long lifespan with the fact that inflation remains the dominant threat to purchasing power, you just have a psychological pressure cooker.
And this pressure cooker is fundamentally altering investor behavior, particularly for younger cohorts who are basically looking for an escape hatch.
They're abandoning the 27-year plan because, let's be real, 27 years feels like an eternity when your rent is up 40%.
Exactly.
The 2026 data shows Gen Z and millennials pivoting aggressively toward highly volatile speculative assets. We are talking about heavy allocations into crypto, options trading, and treating sports betting as a legitimate wealth-building strategy.
It's alarming.
A full third of Gen Z is either invested in or actively considering these avenues.
Yeah, the research characterizes this phenomenon with a rather bleak term. They call it financial nihilism.
Financial nihilism, wow.
Right. When surveyors asked these young investors to explain their risk tolerance, 73% stated they are engaging in these speculative bets because they feel hopelessly financially behind.
So they feel like they have to catch up fast.
Precisely. They perceive the traditional mechanisms of wealth building as structurally broken or just simply too slow to overcome inflation. And when you isolate just Gen Z, that sentiment jumps to 80%.
Oh.
4 out of 5 feel so disenfranchised by the traditional path that they view massive, uncalculated risk as their only viable option.
Which implies a total collapse of trust in the system. They aren't throwing money at sports betting because they're simply reckless or bored.
No.
They're doing it because they've looked at that $1.46 million finish line, looked at their entry-level salary, and deduced that the game is unwinnable by normal rules.
And the emotional logic there is entirely understandable. I mean, if you feel like you're drowning, you don't carefully build a boat, you grab onto whatever is floating by.
Right.
But mathematically, abandoning the traditional path is catastrophic. Because the danger of financial nihilism isn't just the potential loss of the principal investment when a speculative bubble bursts. The true tragedy is the opportunity cost.
So what does this all mean? When you say opportunity cost, you mean...
You lose the time. You lose the compounding cycles.
Right, because you have to start over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you spend your 20s swinging for the fences on highly volatile digital assets or leveraged options and constantly getting wiped out, you arrive at age 35 having completely squandered the most powerful wealth-building years of your life.
Which is devastating.
It is. The traditional methods may feel agonizingly slow, but they possess a mathematical certainty that speculation completely lacks.
We need to give the listener an alternative to the panic and the speculation then, because if we recognize that the $1.46 million figure is an arbitrary ghost, and we accept that risking it all on an app is a losing strategy, what is the actual blueprint?
Right, let's get practical.
Yeah, let's talk about how someone listening to this right now can secure their future using realistic parameters.
Well, the first step is replacing the cultural mythology with personalized mathematics. Northwestern Mutual offers a few excellent rules of thumb that bypass the jargon and help individuals scale their goals to their actual lived experience.
Let's examine those. The first one they highlight is the 25x rule, which suggests aiming to save 25 times your expected annual spending in retirement.
Yeah, that's a classic.
I have to push back on this a little, though. Multiplying my annual expenses by 25 sounds almost as terrifying as just trying to hit 1.4 million.
I get that.
Like, if someone expects to spend $60,000 a year, that rule still demands $1.5 million. How does this actually alleviate the anxiety?
Because it forces you to focus on the variable you can control, your expenses. The 25x rule isn't demanding you earn more. It's illustrating the mathematical relationship between your consumption and your required capital.
Okay, I see.
If you enter retirement with no mortgage, no car payments, and lower tax liabilities, your expected annual spending drops precipitously. If you can lower your required spending to $40,000 a year, your target drops from $1.5 million down to $1 million. The rule scales directly to your lifestyle choices.
Ah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes the $1,000 a month rule they mentioned much more intuitive, too. For every $1,000 you plan to spend each month in retirement, you need roughly $300,000 saved.
Right. And both of these heuristics are derived from the foundational 4% rule. This is the withdrawal strategy where you pull 4% of your total portfolio value in your first year of retirement and then adjust that specific dollar amount for inflation annually.
And that works.
Historically, yes, a diversified portfolio can sustain a 4% withdrawal rate for 30 years without depleting the principal.
Okay, so establishing that personal target is the foundation, but execution is where people really stumble.
They do.
The AARP analysis we reviewed did a great job of distilling the actual habits of those 537,000 Fidelity 401k millionaires into practical applications.
Yes, they laid out some fantastic steps. The primary directive is to capture the employer match immediately. If your company offers a 401k match, contributing up to that threshold is non-negotiable.
It's free money.
It is a guaranteed 100% return on your investment in year one. It's a formalized component of your compensation package, and declining to participate is the mathematical equivalent of refusing to cash a portion of your paycheck.
Right. I want to focus on the mechanics of their second recommendation, though, putting contribution increases on autopilot. How much of a difference does 1% really make?
It fundamentally alters the trajectory of a portfolio over a 20-year horizon. Thanks to the Secure 2.0 legislation, many modern retirement plans now incorporate auto-escalation features.
Where it just goes up automatically.
Exactly. Your contribution rate automatically ticks up by 1% annually. Behavioral economics shows us that humans are just terrible at voluntarily parting with liquid cash.
Oh, absolutely. If I see it in my checking account, it's getting spent.
Right. But if the system quietly redirects an extra 1% before it ever hits your checking account, you simply adjust your baseline spending. You don't even miss it. And if your plan doesn't default to this, manually enabling auto-escalation is honestly the highest leverage 5 minutes you can spend on a benefits portal.
Now, the third AARP step is going to cause some friction for a lot of people. They note that 401k millionaires save aggressively, averaging a 17% contribution rate.
Which is high.
Right, compared to the general Fidelity average of 9.4%. I can hear the listener now asking how on earth they're supposed to carve 17% out of their budget when basic utility costs are surging.
And that's a very fair point. But it rarely happens all at once. The strategy the data supports is allocating future, unseen money.
Unseen money, like raises.
Exactly. Every time you receive a cost-of-living adjustment, a promotion, or a bonus, you aggressively route the majority of that new capital directly into your retirement accounts. You intercept the money before lifestyle creep can absorb it.
Oh, that's smart.
You don't have to cut your current budget to hit 17%. You just have to be extremely disciplined about how you deploy future increases.
But all of that aggressive saving requires a defensive perimeter, which leads to the fourth critical habit, maintaining a separate, liquid emergency fund. Because I noticed a concerning statistic from Fidelity regarding 401k hardship loans.
It is a growing vulnerability, unfortunately. Currently, 18.8% of Fidelity participants have an outstanding loan against their retirement account.
Nearly 1 in 5.
Yeah.
I mean, when a transmission blows or a medical emergency hits, people look at that 401k balance and they just see a lifeline.
They do. But treating a retirement account as a revolving credit facility severely disrupts the compounding process. And if that loan converts to an early withdrawal, or if you take a standard early withdrawal, the penalties are punitive.
It's brutal.
You are hit with standard income tax on the distribution, plus a 10% penalty from the IRS. So a liquid emergency fund sitting in a high-yield savings account is the necessary firewall that allows your investments to remain uninterrupted.
Let's address the listener who might be feeling a sense of dread right now, though. Someone who is, say, 55, realizing they haven't optimized these systems and feeling like the window has just closed.
It hasn't closed. The sources highlight some massive legislative advantages designed specifically for late-stage catch-ups.
Tell me about those.
Well, the IRS recognizes that peak earning years often align with the later stages of a career, and they have structured the tax code to accommodate rapid accumulation. So in 2026, the base contribution limit for a 401k is $24,500.
Okay.
However, if you are aged 50 or older, you are granted an additional $7,500 catch-up allowance.
That's a huge bump.
It is. And furthermore, Secure 2.0 introduced a specialized super catch-up provision. If you are specifically between the ages of 60 and 63, you are permitted an $11,250 catch-up limit on top of the base.
Wow. That allows an older listener to shield a massive amount of income from taxes while simultaneously turbocharging their portfolio right before they transition out of the workforce.
Exactly. It's a powerful tool.
And speaking of optimization, there's one final striking data point from the Northwestern Mutual study concerning professional
Oh,
guidance.
yes. The impact of working with a financial advisor is profound, not just mathematically, but psychologically.
How so?
Individuals who utilize an advisor anticipate retiring at age 63.7 on average. Those navigating the process alone expect to remain in the workforce until 66.1.
That's nearly 2.5 additional years of personal autonomy.
And perhaps more importantly, 74% of those with professional guidance report feeling highly confident in their retirement preparedness. For the unadvised group, that confidence plummets to 43%.
That's a night and day difference.
Having a neutral third party validate your strategy dramatically reduces the anxiety of the unknown.
Which really brings this entire conversation full circle. The $1.46 million expectation is just a phantom hurdle. It is an exclusive club, largely populated by dual-income, highly educated homeowners who have spent 3 decades in the market.
Right.
It is definitively not the mandatory entry fee for a secure, dignified retirement. The data clearly demonstrates that optimizing your match, aggressively banking future raises, and scaling your expectations to your actual living expenses is the proven path forward. You truly don't need the expedition gear for the beach trip.
I'd offer one final paradigm-shifting insight from the Northwestern Mutual data that might alleviate any remaining pressure.
I'd love to hear it.
When surveying Americans on their future plans, researchers discovered that 41% of people actively plan to continue working in some capacity during their retirement years.
See, that feels counterintuitive to the entire concept of retirement.
It does, until you look at their motivations. The primary reason wasn't financial desperation. The majority stated they want to continue working to maintain a sense of utility, mental stimulation, and social engagement.
Oh, I get that.
Yeah. If retirement is evolving away from a hard, irreversible stop at age 65 and transforming into a fluid transition toward consulting, part-time passion projects, or lower stress engagements, the underlying math fundamentally changes.
Oh, absolutely.
If you are still generating enough income to cover your basic living expenses doing something you find fulfilling, the pressure to hoard a massive mountain of capital in your 60s is vastly diminished.
That completely rewires the 4% rule, doesn't it? If your consulting work covers your overhead, your portfolio can just sit untouched, continuing to compound well into your 70s. The flexibility that offers is incredible.
It really is.
Well, this has been such an illuminating examination of the numbers behind our collective financial anxiety. For everyone listening, if navigating this data helped clear some of the fog and lower your blood pressure today, please take a second to like and subscribe to the show.
Definitely.
We also have some exceptional tools to help you map out your personal 25x or 4% goals. You can find our affiliate marketing links right in the show notes, so definitely click through those to support the deep dive. And we are thrilled to announce that our new Fourth Wall merchandise store is officially live. Yes! You can grab all your official deep dive apparel, hoodies, mugs, the works. The link is right there in the description. Finally, jump into the comments and tell us what notebook, dense research paper, or complex topic you want us to deep dive into next. Leave the avalanche beacon behind, trust your strategy, and enjoy the beach. We will catch you on the next one.